Hey, this is Steven Brodsky from Caven and Mutoid Man, and you're listening to The New Scene.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The New Scene. I am your host, Keith, and we're back with another brand new episode. And on the show this week, we have a guest I've been waiting a long time for, and it finally happened. We have Jacob Bannon, one of the most prolific people from our scene, and someone whose work I've been a fan of since I discovered this music way back in 1998. Umbra Vitae has an excellent new record coming out this week on Deathwish Inc. It's called Light of Death. We cover that. There's a lot of Converge discussion. Also, Jake shares with us some of the inner workings of his label, Deathwish Inc., his day-to-day life, some insights on the music industry. It's just an overall great conversation that I cannot wait for you to hear. So if you are a new listener to the podcast, welcome. We post new episodes every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It doesn't matter what's going on that day. It doesn't matter if it's a holiday. It doesn't matter if I'm in the hospital. It just doesn't matter. New episodes every Monday morning. And I want to let you all know that we've begun the push to 300 Apple Podcast and Spotify reviews. We currently sit at 211 on Apple Podcasts and 254 on Spotify. So if you're a new listener to the show, or if you haven't rated the show yet, please open up your Apple Podcast or Spotify app and hit the 5-star button. It only takes a minute, and it really helps us out. If you leave a review on Apple Podcasts or feedback on Spotify, I'll read those in the end part of the show during the New Scene Community Hour. And don't forget to support our partner, Iodine Recordings. The debut LP from Love Letter is up for pre-order right now. The record is called Everyone Wants Something Beautiful. Love Letter features founding members of Verse and Defeater, and they have a new single out called Misanthropic Holiday or Vacation. Check it out today. The new LP from Her Head's on Fire is called Strange Desires, and it's out July 19th. They also just released another new single from the LP called Aren't I the Champion? Check them out on their UK tour. That's June 2nd through June 9th. And Iodine Recordings has a spring cleaning sale going on. $3 7 inches, $10 LPs, and $15 2X LPs. And there's a lot of good stuff in there. I just picked up the Hey Thanks LP, Start Living, for only $10. There's a link to the sale in the Iodine newsletter. Make sure you sign up for that newsletter because you'll find out about everything going on at the label before everyone else. That sale is going on at their store at Deathwish Inc. Go check it out. Also, say hello to our sponsor for the month of June. We bring you the epic return of Persistent Vision Records. Persistent Vision is an independent label based in Richmond, Virginia, and home to releases by Page 99, Abak, Mausanera, Respire, Prisoner, and more. We've got some new releases coming out on Persistent Vision in June, and they are available for order. Abak, the Insania LP. This is a reissue of Abak's 2016 debut on vinyl for the first time ever, with remastering by the great Jack Shirley. Pick it up. They've also got a European tour in June and July. Respire, Denouement, plus the Memorial 2X LP. This is a reissue of Respire's acclaimed second full-length and is packaged as a double LP with the instrumental companion album Memorial. Respire are one of my favorite bands, and Denouement is a must-listen. They've been on this podcast as well, episode 39. Farn, The Departure of Consciousness LP. This is a 10-year anniversary reissue from the Funeral Sludge Ensemble. Farn. They're playing their first live shows in 5 years this June. Check out their page or the Persistent Vision page for more details. You can order any of these releases online at persistentvisionrecords.com. They're also available at deathwishinc.com. For more updates, follow Persistent Vision on Instagram at Persistent Vision Records. Okay, so make sure you check back in with me. In segment 3, we'll do a wrap-up of the conversation with Jacob. We'll talk about the new record from Umbra Vitae. I heard in advance of it, and that's coming out this Friday. We'll talk about some other new music. We'll cover everything. But right now, we are going to speak to Jacob Bannon. Enjoy. All right, we are here now with Jacob Bannon. Jacob, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's great to have you here. You know, you've made many, many contributions to this world of music. From all the art you've done, Deathwish Inc., Converge, Super Machiner, Where Are Your Wounds? We've got a new record coming up from Umbra Vitae, and that's exciting. And we're going to cover most of that. But first, I want to ask you, how are you doing today?
How am I doing today? I'm doing all right today. My days are complicated because being a for lack of better terminology, a creative person professionally, I have to wear a lot of hats every day, and I do a lot of different things every day. So I have multiple jobs that all kind of come from the same place. So many times, like when I come into work in the morning, I have an idea as to how the day is going to go. And then there's a variety of swerves and zigs and zags that tend to occur, which kind of take me on a bit of a wild ride. But in the end of the day, it all kind of works out. I think that anybody that's a creative person that has multiple jobs and positions and responsibilities can kind of understand and relate to that problem and sort of struggle, I guess, challenge.
Right, because you're getting hit from every angle. You've got like 3 different bands. You've got Deathwish Inc., and then you do a lot of commissioned work for all types of different bands and different people, right?
Yeah, so it's always sort of shifting between the day as to like what I have to do and what's on my plate. Typically, I come in and I start about 8:30 in the morning after I take my kids to school, and then I just start sort of chopping at the list, and it's usually a mix of design work, art direction, order packing, business management, and that's sort of all the bands are, for lack of better terminology, self-managed. So we all do our own thing. Nobody helps us do that. So all of those things fall to me to take care of. That sort of responsibility. So so every day that's always changing. Like one day it'll be a lot of Umbra things that I have to work on. The next day it'll be Converge things and whatnot. And when I'm doing work for Deathwish, which is also every day, because that's where I am, I'm running the print aspect of that business and packing orders, talking with visual artists, working with them on their sort of collections and ideas and things that they want to get out into the world. And I try to help facilitate that for everybody. Like today, for example, I came in, had a variety of Converge things to take care of, and then I had to finish a Red Chord reissue campaign that I've been working with Guy and in the band on that stuff for the last couple months, and I worked on it the last few months, and it all kind of comes to a head at like 10 a.m. on a day like this where I have to get everything out the door, all the aspects of it that I designed and worked on for them and whatnot. And that's kind of how most days go for me. All those little invisible things that you see get pumped out by a record label and by a band. On the visual end, I'm usually the person putting all of those things together. And at the very least, have my hands in all of that in some capacity. And if it's copy in things that I have to write, as long as it's not for my band, I typically do those things for all the Deathwish affiliated artists and things like that. Promote tours, schedule things, you name it. I'm pretty much in all of that for everybody.
What's a typical day for you? Are you usually in the office working on all this?
Yeah, I come in every day. Usually anywhere between, as I said, 8:30 in the morning, and I try to get out around 5 or 6, sometimes 7 or 8. I don't take breaks. I never have. I'm not really interested in them. I just kind of keep working until I feel like I've hit my limit. And sometimes I can go home and spend some time with the family and take care of the responsibilities there that I have to take care of. And after everyone goes to sleep, I usually will work for another hour or two and sort of organize my next morning if I haven't done so already. And I do that every day. That's what I do.
How old are your kids? How many do you have?
I have 2.
How old are they?
7 and 9.
Ah, you're married too, right?
Yes.
How long?
A very long time. We've been together for a very, very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got it sounds like you've got a very busy work life and home life.
I do. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I try to, I definitely don't have as much time as I would like in terms of being a creative person and making, art and music for myself. So most of my output revolves around sort of, projects and records and things like that are organized in that way. That's probably the one thing that I've had. I don't usually put it on the back burner or anything like that, but I do. In terms of I don't take a night and just paint or anything like that. I just don't have the time. Like after I have, I don't have the gas left in me after I've, worked a full, 8, 10, 12 hours in a day. Like it's difficult sometimes to want to, I guess get up and make some personal art that isn't tied to a sort of underlying project or something like that.
Right. Yeah, because I'll push myself for months, right? Whether, the podcast is an every week thing, that's like a full-time job, bands, whatever else I'm doing. And then I just hit a wall and I have to take a day for myself and just kind of do nothing. Does that ever happen to you?
No. Only because economics of life don't really dictate that for me. So, I own a business and I run a business, and there's a lot of folks that sort of depend on my my input and my direction every day, and so I don't really take that day. I do try to. With that said, I do try to take weekends as much as possible, especially with my family and the kids, and just sort of be present with them and hang out and do whatever they want to do, and that's my time away from the grind of work. And that usually is enough for me to be able to sort of reset and then come in fresh. Because sometimes I only need an hour or two away from something. Sometimes I will visually problem solve something while I'm laying in bed at night before I fall asleep, and all of a sudden I have some sort of epiphany to something that I was working on musically or visually, and I go, oh, I can push it this way. I can do something this way or whatever. So my brain's always kind of on in some way, and I'm fine with that for the most part.
Yeah. Because I was going to say, you strike me as someone who's just constantly working on things, whether it be your things or something related with the label.
Yeah, and the label in the last 20 years has sort of mutated and grown and evolved into something altogether different than even what I intended for it to be. And in some ways, it's become what I've wanted it to be. In other ways, it it's sort of like veered off into its own path. But we're very much a distributor as well, as a record label. We probably spend 50-50 in terms of time and effort into those aspects of the business. And we're handling a lot of the manufacturing and distribution and marketing and promotion for other labels. It's been that way for quite a long time. So we almost sort of, we might not have our name on a lot of things, but we're responsible for a lot of things, if that makes sense.
It does.
And that's it.
Especially because you're hosting my podcast store.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's a perfect example, right? And that's today, for example, as I was telling you before, like I was working on things for the Red Chord and for Guy and his label Black Market Activities, who we've been the distributor for a long time. And the label's been pretty dormant the last handful of years, but he's bringing some aspects of it back to life. And, we're one of the cogs in that machine, doing that alongside of him. And we do that for, a lot of businesses. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that communal aspect of all of these things. And I try to, just try to be as helpful as I can to these musicians and visual artists that we represent in some manner. And it goes by fast and it goes by wildly, but it goes.
Absolutely. When you said the label is different from how you imagined, do you just mean business-wise or the types of bands, or like what specifically?
Well, I don't. There's no way I would have been able to sort of predict where media was to go and how things were going to grow and what things would be popularized and what things wouldn't be. When we first started, I just wanted to put out records for our band because I felt that we weren't really getting a fair shake in a lot of places in the sort of traditional business model that was out there. So I wanted to kind of create an alternative that was more fair across the board. And we looked to labels that we felt were doing that at the time. And there weren't that many, but there were a few out there. And we liked those models, and we wanted to try to implement that into our sort of punk rock and aggressive music space. And that's just mutated and grown in all sorts of directions in the last 20 years. It was sort of business suicide to start a record label as like in the same years that Napster and LimeWire and all the torrent sites were becoming a thing. We never have been part of that sort of old guard, that benefited from insane record sales or anything like that. We've always sort of been right at the forefront of whatever was happening and sort of watching all of these, medias and digital music services come to life, become a thing, not become a thing, go away, get bought and sold. We've seen record labels and distributors come and go, and we look at those and we learn from their mistakes and their experiences, and try to put something together that just works. And we have a small team. I don't know how many what people think Deathwish is in terms of a business. If they're familiar with it, I'm sure there's some people that think we have like a bajillion people here. I think there's some people that probably think there's no one. But we have a handful of people, and at any given day, there's 6 or 7 of us here, just trying to make it work for everybody. Because again, it's as being a podcaster and somebody that's trying to be a creative person in this world, it's an uphill battle, right? So it's for a long time it was easier for people to get all of the sort of music experiences that we all put out there for free. You have to really show people that it has intrinsic value, and it's worth supporting, because these the models that are out there now just simply don't do that. So yeah, it's definitely an uphill battle, and it's always changing. And I'm sure, like, in 3 or 5 years, it'll be different again, and there'll be different complexities that we have to navigate.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, everything's different. CDs are gone. It seems like people are buying more music more now, which is good because vinyl is such a thing. I feel like people are more willing to go see a band and buy a shirt or throw some money in the tip jar. So those are all good things. But just everything has changed with, the way albums are uploaded and single lead ups and all that stuff. And people aren't even really listening to full albums anymore.
Yeah, I mean, music releases, would have there was different release schedules, different times how you did things, different things you could prioritize, different ways you could reach people, and we're just always trying to find ways to connect with the people that relate to our sort of punk rock world. It's that aspect of things is always challenging. So it's doing things like this independently. It's the constant sort of advertising, getting out there, and just getting in front of people and saying, like, hey, all this stuff is wonderful and has a cool place in this world for people that are looking for for something that's not traditional pop music. It's also an interesting time in sort of aggressive music history as well, because it's there are new waves of it coming and going, but the look is much different, right? So, like, I see labels experimenting with releasing music that doesn't really look like it has independent spirit, but is presented in that way. I see things that basically resemble pop to me from my age group and demographic, and they sound like that and they're presented in that way, but they're marketed or presented as punk, and I don't understand that. Well, I understand what it is, but um, that's an interesting thing, and I don't think it's right or wrong. You're just seeing all these like weird mutations of the idea of what independent music is, and it's not necessarily all not all aggressive or all this or all that. It's just like wildly all over the place.
Yeah. Sometimes you see a reel pop up and I'm like, oh, that's just marketing the band.
Yeah, basically. There's definitely that. I've in the last probably the last like year or two, I've really tried to distance my any personal time I have from like looking at those things, because it I don't want to see what it feeds me.
Yes.
The algorithms are still quite they're all quite like rudimentary, and I think that they sometimes when I see stuff that's just like that artistically doesn't connect with me, and it can exist, it can be whatever. I'm not a person that feels like any of that stuff should be suppressed in any way. People should be able to do whatever they want, but like, yeah, when I see it, I'm like, oh, that's not speaking the creative language that I want to speak. So I'm just gonna I don't want that fed to me, so I'm just simply not going to look at it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. If I didn't have to run my own social media, I wouldn't. I would probably not be on it at all.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think everybody is guilty of some sort of form of doom scrolling at some point, right? But like,
right,
you need to. I think it's important to just sort of set limits for yourself and understand, what those things are and like what they can do to you, and how it sort of removes you from the things around you that matter more than whatever is inside of the digital rectangle.
Right.
I think that's super important.
Umbra Vitae,
Mm-hmm.
a band full of heavy hitters, including yourself. Now, I read that this was formed during rehearsal sessions for Wear Your Wounds. Is that true?
Yeah, to a degree, at least like it kind of becoming an actual thing that we wanted to execute.
Yeah.
Years ago, when Sean first left Hatebreed, and I was spending a fair amount of time with him. We talked about trying to do a band at that time, and this would have been in the early 2000s. And one of our like working names I had was Deep End, and I used that for a song title on this record. Actually, sort of calling to back to that time when we started talking about making music together and like trading some riff ideas back and forth. But initially when Weary Wounds were working on our second record, our second proper record or whatever, we're all aggressive music guys, So we would hang out and kind of rip for a little bit and have some fun, and some of the riffs and some things that would just kind of happen while we were just like messing around, waiting for somebody to show up or something like that. Were super cool, and are like, these are like really valid and they're fun, and it just kind of rekindled my interest in doing something heavy again. Because at that point, I wouldn't say I wasn't removed from it or anything, because I was still, obviously doing Converge and doing everything else, but I just wasn't being lit up creatively by a lot of stuff that was sort of happening out there. And we started putting some stuff together, and just kind of quickly became a band. It was initially myself and Adam. Sorry, not Adam. Myself, Mike, and Chris Maggio, who's in Where Your Wounds with us as well. But he took a gig doing some High on Fire touring, and so he wasn't available to record. And at the time, Mike was like, "Hey, you know what? It'd be really fun to get John to play with us." Because I really miss playing with him, since he was playing with the red chord, and the red chord wasn't active at that point. So he's like, "Hey, let me reach out to John and see if he wanted to do something." At the time, John was doing stuff, touring with Behemoth and 1349, and He's an Uncle Acid and a whole bunch of stuff. And he was like, "Yeah, I'd love to do it. Let's get together. Send us some ideas." Sean is also in Where Your Wounds as well, and he's like, "I got some riffs. Let's get some things going." We've always been tight with Greg, who's been Mike's sort of cohort in the Red Chord for a very long time, among many other bands, and they're just sort of like this really cool, like Bert and Ernie of heavy music. They're really fun to be around, and they have a really cool chemistry together. And I get along with Greg really well, and we're like, "Hey, I was like, "Hey, if we're gonna do a heavy band, I don't want to play bass and sing because it's really hard." And I have decades of screaming like an idiot, running around on stage. It's like, that's like, for better or worse, like I put down stringed instruments when Converge needed a vocalist a long time ago, and I was like, I guess I'll be the guy because no one else wants to be the guy. And like, that's kind of been my wheelhouse, for a while. And I was like, I just don't want to play bass and do it. I can't. There's no way I can do it. And we're like, let's get Greg. And so let's get Greg. And Greg was like, "Yep, I'm in." So that's kind of how it came to be. So we just started writing songs, and we created our first record. COVID obviously threw a bunch of curveballs at that release. Was we had some plans as to what we wanted to do, and we wanted to tour and do some shows and whatnot, and that was pretty much near impossible at the time. So it kind of changed the trajectory of that record, but it came out, and we're still really proud of it. And as soon as it was done, we're like, okay, we really want to make another record. Let's make another record. And we started trading ideas, and here we are.
Right. Yeah, I remember that coming out during a prime pandemic, and I wasn't like fully paying attention. I was like, wait, did these guys make a new band because of the pandemic, or?
Sure, and that was happening in a lot of places, right? So you had that happening with a lot of things. But yeah, we had it happen. We had it going before that, and it just sort of COVID kind of blew that apart for a little while. But yeah, so now we're back at it, and it's exciting for us. We're all really proud of this record. Like, we've all been making music for a long time, and we're just as sort of angsty and very much the same people we've always been, even though we've gotten older, whatever. Yeah, that is what it is. Um, but we still very much have an itch and an anger that we want to express in music, and this band feels right for that.
Yeah, I love Shadow of Life. I love what I've heard of the new record so far because when I discovered this music, I came in around 98 and I was listening to Converge and Cave In and Botch and Dillinger Escape Plan. So that was my starting point. I never really got into metal or death metal or black metal or any of that. Some of it I like, but it's never been my main thing. But if it's guys from bands I listen to playing metal or black metal or some version of it, then I like it. I mean, I like what you guys are doing.
Well, thank you. Here's the thing: like we will for lack of any other way of putting it, we call ourselves a metal band because somebody has to file us somewhere, but we're really the sum of our parts, right? Like, John comes from Job for a Cowboy and then the traditional metal world. Gunface Mike, he's probably the most proficient guitar player I know, and is a metal fiend. Like he'll talk to you about like a CDR demo of an upstate New York death metal band that put out one demo in 1992, and he's got that, and he's got their basement tapes. He's a maniac when it comes to that world, and I really appreciate that kind of fanaticism. Greg is very much a student in music as well, and Sean is one of the most versatile guitarists and musicians I know. And so just like we're the sum of our parts. We're always going to sound like us. Like when people call it, like if it's a metal band, like I don't sound like a traditional hardcore metal vocalist. I just do what comes out. It is just like all my other favorite vocalists that I've liked, and in my own personal listening. So like I know it's not gonna sound like traditional death metal or traditional hardcore or metalcore or however anybody defines it. It's gonna be us.
We've got the new record, Light of Death, coming up. Talk about, what, before we get to that, I'm curious about your approach with Umbra Vitae. I read an old Converge interview with you where you said when it comes to writing, you're basically writing about the struggle you've had the last couple of years, and you want to write about things that have weight and have meaning. Do you take a similar approach with Umbra Vitae?
Similar in the sense that the subject matter is substantive and weighty for sure. Because I've never been a fan of playing something or writing something to be brutal just to be brutal. I want it to connect with me. I want it to be a real story, a real emotion, and I think that's for me one of the things I don't find appealing about certain sort of subgenres of metal when things kind of fall into almost like role play. And and I'm not saying that that's not a valid form of art or music. It is what it is. People can connect with it all they want. But for me as a person, I want to understand and feel a feeling. I want to feel a connection that's not just like the brutality of a particular riff or the heaviness of a song or something like that. And so, lyrics have always been a big part of what I bring to the table, and like the Converge lyrics were very much like prose that I would put together almost like in diary form, here and there. Like even today I wrote some stuff for Converge earlier today. It's just like I just write when I feel motivated to write. And this band is similar in mentality, but I'm looking at larger world subjects and sort of larger ideas and sort of philosophies and things like that, rather than being personal reflections, like fully, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. Yeah. That's a similar approach that I've wanted to take, because sometimes I just get tired of writing about myself. I'm like, I'm sick of hearing about me. Let me try to tackle something else for once.
Well, and that's something that I came to, and I agree with you, because as a person, I realized that there's a point of diminishing returns, like sort of soulfully, when you're writing about your own experiences, and you're putting these things out there that aren't necessarily, they're complex. They're complex situations, and more often than not, you're venting in a big emotional way about something. Well, after a while, and after multiple records, it's like, yeah, that it's valid. It's great. It connects with me. It feels like like some sort of purging of some negative energy. But if I have to do that, I'm always going to, the well never exhausts, and there's a point where I'm like, I don't know if this is good for me to do solely that in terms of approach psychologically. And sometimes that like pure raw nerve approach is great, and is like immensely powerful, but it's also really draining. So I just want to do something that has context, it has emotional weight, but again, it's more observational than it is personal.
Is there an overall theme for Light of Death, the new LP coming out?
Well, I liked the idea of connecting the two records. So like Shadow of Life it was the first one. Light of Death being kind of on the nose the second. It's not meant to be this like intensely poetic statement, but it makes sense in context. So this record, it's very observational about the times in which we live in, the tribulations and trials that we've gone through personally and as well as culturally in the last like decade or two. And I try to touch on all of those ideas that have sort of made me stay up at night, think, and try to organize those thoughts and share them with people in some way. Some of it reads personal. Most of it though is mainly observational, I think.
In terms of world events of the past 2 decades, what is one of those things that you've thought about a lot or has kept you up at night?
Well, just the societal constructs, and what all of this is, and what it all means is, and how we're just sort of we're such a small, insignificant blip on the time clock of Earth. And I wrestle with a lot of the ideas that get in our ways as people. I can go through song by song in a way and see that in almost each one. Like for example, like the first song released on this record is a song called "Belief is Obsolete," and that whole idea was that the idea of traditional belief systems doesn't really work in the context of the society that we live in, and it doesn't really provide the comfort that these belief systems were initially created to bring to people under the pressures that we live in today. Like we do it inside of a thrash song, because it's fun. And a lot of these songs have that kind of idea, and play with those ideas and explore those ideas. We have a song that we're going to be releasing in a week or so that I really enjoy, called "Anti-Spirit Machine," and it's about a similar thing, but about how the construct of the society and culture that we live in basically wears you down and makes you simply sort of like rinse and repeat to sort of function and to exist. you have to make ends meet, but you can't necessarily make ideas in your head meet. Like at the end of the day, the dollar wins over anything.
Right.
It's yeah, it's about exploring those ideas and how we all kind of get caught up in those gears and the complexities of that, and lose parts of ourselves and sacrifice parts of ourselves consciously and unconsciously in those things. So there's a lot of that shit in this record. There's like definitely it rears its head in a bunch of places.
That's interesting. That's something I think about too. Like, this society is not built to fertilize ideas or art or anything else. It's just to put people to work, keep them busy, keep them not thinking, keep them moving forward until they retire or die. So to really get out there and make art and make ideas and make yourself heard. I mean, it's a real struggle. A lot of people know you have to work multiple jobs and squeeze in the art when you can. Unless, of course, you're independently wealthy, then you can just do whatever you want all the time.
That would be incredible, right? But
Yeah.
I am an average working class person. Average working, middle class. I probably land somewhere in like the upper middle class world, but I fight for it. And
Right.
I don't. And I raise a family on that, and it's definitely challenging. I have a like a verse in this record in a song called Past Tense. That's a constructs collapse, courage corrodes, daydreams degrade, and teardrops explode. And then it goes, I just want to survive long enough to know who was right. And that pretty much sums up some of my thoughts on these subjects. Um, you know, and by meaning survive, I want to survive. Would it be a million years, billion years? I just want to know who was right in the end, if anybody was right in the end, because this system is very complicated and it grinds people up for sure.
Big time. So Converge, you are in this band as well, and we all know that.
Yes.
I read an old interview with you about Jane Doe, and you said that it was panned upon release. Now, I didn't read any reviews at that time. Did critics not like it? Was that what was going on at that time?
It was our first record that we did that had proper publicity. Like, we never had anybody work with us on anything and sort of manage that aspect. We just would put out records and people like them and they like them, or they don't, whatever. And we used a PR company that was working with a lot of, I guess, just heavy bands at the time to sort of get the word out about that record. And I believe that suggestion actually came from my old friend Gordon, who runs Season of Mist now in the States. He used to work for Relapse as the general manager for a long time, and he connected us with a PR person to help us with that record. And I remember I remember talking to Equal Vision back then, and they were like, I don't know, do we have to pay for this? I'm like, oh, I mean, you don't have to, but it's a thing that's done, and we're putting a lot of effort into it, and maybe we could, maybe it would be beneficial to everybody. Because at the time, in 2000, 2001, our genre or subgenre of music was really in its infancy and really not represented as it is now within sort of aggressive music or music in general publications. Like, it just wasn't there. There was traditional metal, traditional, and in that, you would get like hard rock and metal would kind of get grouped together, and then you had some coverage of death metal and this sort of the underground black metal that was happening. But hardcore, especially metallic hardcore, wasn't really represented fully in those places. So that record, along with, I'm sure there was plenty of other records at that time that came out, were some of the first sort of forays into that style of music that a lot of music press basically heard. And then most of them were just like, what is this? because it's all recorded usually by band members in some way. So we're outside of the big studio systems for the most part. Even that record was actually like our first one where we were actually in like a proper studio that felt like, oh wow, there's some pressure. But like for the most part, we were recording, in Kurt's basement of his houses and things like that.
Yeah, I read that too. I was surprised to read that. But yeah, Gene Doe first record recorded in like a real big, studio that wasn't like a basement.
Yeah, we recorded some of it at an early version of God City. We did a lot of it at Q Division Studios in Somerville, Mass. At the time, like we were we were in like Studio A, and mind you, this was like we had so much pressure too, because this was like, I mean, we're not rich by any means now, but like 20 something versions of us were eating like ramen every day only, and like
Right.
trying to make it work, like just trying to, we weren't really concerned with the future. We were just concerned with just existing, so like we're in there, and like there's a lot of pressure, a record label's paying for this, and they're giving us like, I think it was, I don't remember how much it was, maybe like $10,000 to make it or something like that, or like 20,000 or something. And like I think we were in there for like a week, and there was so much pressure, working with an outside engineer. There's assistants coming in and tape splicing. I never saw that in my life before, where it'd be like, oh, hey, can you cut out that cymbal hit at this point on the tape? And then, the guy just pulls out a razor blade and just cuts the tape and splices it back together. There you go. It's done. Like, it was just all so new and so overwhelming that we were just like, all right. So anyway, when the record came out, yeah, people didn't really know how to take us or the genre, and it was one of the first ones that were coming out and landing in some of this music press that just simply didn't understand the language. So it was, yeah, there was a lot of panning that we saw, and only because it was like some of the first reviews as a band we ever got too, because our previous records, aside from being reviewed in fanzines and stuff by primarily people that are already supporters of the genre or excited or at least working within the subgenre, you're insulated at that point. You're, for the most part, it's people that already kind of appreciate what you're all trying to do. So like us landing in the pages of all these things, like they did not know how to take us. If anything, it was like, it was lo-fi, it was noisy. You can't understand the guy. What's the guy saying? This guy sounds crazy. Yada yada yada. I wanted to treat the record more as an art piece a rather than a traditional record. So I wanted the visuals to sort of represent the chaotic nature of what the music was. So I tried to do that. So, like I listened to things, I would rip stuff apart, I'd Xerox things, rip things apart, Xerox things again, rip things apart, scan them, paint them, rip things apart, take the type, obliterate the type, do it, like I was just experimenting the whole time. And so like it kind of took the idea of a traditional approach to a record, and I was trying to like flip it on its head. And that wasn't like a new idea. I'm sure there's countless artists that have tried to do that already, at that point. But in terms of trying to make a cohesive thing like that and present it to the world, it's almost like you're presenting something broken on purpose, if that makes sense.
And it was new for that scene because it was the first time I had seen something like that, because it was always important to me to read all the lyrics at that time so I could take the ones I like best and paste them into my instant messenger profile or whatever I was doing at the time. And I remember looking at the booklet for Gene Doe and I was like, oh no, I can't read all the lyrics.
Yeah,
but I eventually Equal Vision just put them up on the website, and I was like, oh, okay.
Well, what I did was I stuck them on the all the lyrics. So I went in with my lyric book of stuff, right? So it's just like this big mess of stuff, things earmarked for each song. And I would just sort of riff on what worked. Sometimes I would repeat a line like 7 times. Sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes I would keep it more to like a traditional chorus, verse, chorus thing, whatever. But I was just kind of like pulling from the notebook and pulling from this big mass of prose. And then we're kind of like trying to chop it up and turn it into songs, right? And song structure. So like how can I artistically convey that chaos in a kind of organized way? And that was like, it was a huge challenge. I mean, like at EVR, they were not happy with us delivering the record as it was. They wanted something more traditional, and I understood, but that wasn't what the vision was. So
Right.
it was kind of like, it was like one of the times that I realized, like, I don't think, at least at this point, we're not really going to see eye to eye creatively on this, among other things, but like, especially there. But they did their best, and they hired the outside PR. We tried to play the game, and kind of get out there and just kind of be in front of people in an uncomfortable way. And yeah, it wasn't received. It wasn't received well. But again, we didn't care, and we still don't care. We just still do our own thing. It's like literally the same thing that we do now. So it is what it is. But yeah, like I think that there's aspects of that record that I think are really good. There's aspects of it that I don't. But like that's me. I lose sort of creative ownership of something once it's sort of out in the world, and it just is what it is, and it just goes, and you're just like, okay, whatever. People will either connect with it or don't. People have, and I think over time people have sort of understood this sort of approach to that record and what we were trying to capture and what we inherently did capture in that record, and along with other Converge records, because that sort of theme and idea of like that like running, there's always like a running line with Converge that like we're too hard for punk kids, we're too metal for hardcore kids, and like everyone else either understands us or doesn't. It's just kind of the way it works for us.
Right. Well, I appreciated that record. At the time, a lot of heavy bands that I liked were going softer, and I kind of got disenfranchised with the whole thing because I was like, man, I get into these bands, they change their sound, and I distanced myself from the music a few years later for various reasons, for a little bit after that. But Jane Doe, you guys did the opposite, and it was like the most brutal thing yet, which I appreciated.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you listening to it. I think as a band, we were also like going through some growing pains and some lineup issues at the time too. And so for me, it's like really, it's hard to separate any of that stuff from that record, for me,
Right.
because like at the end of the day, like, we had to ask, one of our good friends to lead the band, and I didn't, but like during that was like all coming to a head as we were making the record and writing the record, and like that didn't feel good, none of that felt good, but it was at the time it felt necessary, and at least keep all of our morale going, and everyone to kind of feel like we were, in a good place, and that's so like. I always found that aspect of things to be upsetting. And I've never really been able to, I can't separate that from it. So mainly because of that, like I've never really wanted to even really connect with the record, after it, I've always, like, even when I was young, like and starting all this stuff, I just wanted to keep making stuff, and I'm still that way now, but especially like with that record, and like it kind of felt like we made something like really really pure and kind of wild. It was misunderstood, and then like when it started to kind of it got some sort of like acknowledgement or whatever, it's just always been like it's just always like a thing I can't shake my initial emotional weight that I had, like of that time, and like making that record. So I just kind of choose to move on and move forward. And like You Fail Me record, to me, that came out after that, is one of like the first proper Converge records, where it was the proper four of us really like honing down and sharpening something and making something that represented the four of us creatively. And then, since then it's just kind of been, we've been kind of just going.
Right. Reading about You Fail Me, and tell me if this is accurate. I read that, during Jane Doe, some of the subject matter had to do with a breakup and the end of a relationship and coming out of that. And you expected the release of Jane Doe and playing those shows and everything to relieve those crushing feelings that you were feeling, to relieve the depression.
Sure.
But it didn't. And you carried that into You Fail Me. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. It's not a continuation or anything like that, but it's accurate in the sense that I realized as a creative person that writing a song and writing a record and doing something that might be powerful in the moment for me and feel cathartic, that wasn't it's not the end of the road of your trials and tribulations. Life gets more complicated and more complex, um, and lighter in some ways, darker in others, and more gray everywhere else, right? So like I kind of carried that sort of disappointment and that, how can I put it that would make the most sense? I guess it's a realization of sorts that though the art and the music is cathartic, it wasn't going to solve my problems in a juvenile way. I wasn't going to be able to just help be part of, like just writing something and creating something with the guys and then walk away and be like, I feel great now. I realize that this is a process and I've got a long way to go as a person. And I think we all do. So that record very much kind of carried that theme, the You Fail Me album.
How do you end up working through those feelings that you're carrying around?
I write songs. I make art when I can, and I kind of wrestle with them and realize that the world's not necessarily the world is a complex place that is full of people that are broken in a variety of ways. And you're always trying to figure out ways to navigate that in a healthy manner. And I still try to do that within songs, because that's the only way I know how. That seems to bring some sort of, I don't know, like moments of of sort of peace like that. Like when you when you write something, you make something, and it emotionally connects with you, and you feel it, like that's a really powerful moment, right? Where you're like, I just said what I wanted to say, or I just visually created something that makes me feel, that almost like resonates the emotion inside me. And that's kind of that's the chase. That's like what it is. I think that's like why a lot of creative folks continue to make stuff. Because you're always kind of trying to work that out. And the older I've become, the more complex your life becomes, the more life experiences you have, the more ups, the more downs. You never run out of things. You just don't.
Right.
I think you run out of gas before, like psychologically, before you run out of where you run out of like physical gas before you run out of psychological fuel. If that makes sense.
It does. There's always going to be something to sing about. Just wait a couple years, right?
Yeah, honestly, like, and here's the thing, right? Like, we're talking about like Umbra and like I and like Weird Wounds and stuff. Like even in with Converge as well. Like I genuinely love all of those people in all of those bands, and I really appreciate what we all make together. And when we do it, it feels, yeah, it feels magical, but we're all still chasing it, you know. And I can smile and I can have fun with it, and we can joke around on stage, and we can do whatever. And but at the end of the day, like when we're in a song and we're working through the things and while we're playing a song, like sometimes you kind of get like you are operating on like a raw nerve kind of level, and you're especially in this genre of music where things are like really emotional, and there's a lot of things that you just don't talk about. Like you don't talk about it outside of playing the song. You're gonna after you finish playing your set or doing whatever, making your record, you never sit and talk about like you know why you were compelled to write that riff or to write that lyric and what that means to you. But I know when I'm playing a song and I'm next to my pal Sean Martin, we can look at each other. We might be like having the time of our lives in terms of just being physical and in the moment. But we look at each other and we go, I know why you wrote this, and I know why you wrote this, and I know why we're both here doing this, and this is like there's a lot of unsaid things that happen within bands like that, and the same thing goes within Converge with Kurt and Nate and Ben, and it's the same for Wear Your Wounds as well. It's something really really powerful. Even when I did the some of the first Wear Your Wounds touring, like pre-pandemic, right? We were doing some of that stuff. All those guys knew that I was going through a lot of stuff at the time, and they all knew I was working on this music that was, intensely emotional and personal for me, and they all showed up for me in some way, to play alongside me and to do that, and that was like a really powerful and special thing. But it's like something that you don't talk about, you just do it,
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, now that I never really thought about it like that. There's things I've written about in songs. It's not obvious, but I know what it's about, but I would never admit what it's about, and I would never necessarily talk about what it's about, but I need to express those feelings, right?
You need to express those feelings, and your band members, at least like in my experiences, we all know, but we don't talk about it past that. Like we just kind of like,
Yeah.
there's like an unsaid thing, and you go like, I know, that's why we're here. This is why we're working out all our demons and all our faults and our frustrations here. And it's better than what other alternatives are out there in the world.
No Heroes, your 2006 record. Now, this is an important one to me because I was distanced from the music for a little bit. I never like completely dropped out or stopped going to shows or anything, but I don't know. I got really into post-rock at one point and I was just checking out different things, but No Heroes kind of brought me back into the world of heavy music. So it's a special Converge record for me. Is there like an overall theme for this one? Is there like an overall story? Tell us about it.
Sure. So let's see. Going back to that record, we were working on that material a lot. We were touring a lot, and we were kind of. I mean, we've never been like a band that's been out, touring for like a whole year or anything like that. But we were gone a lot for that record and the next one, and I don't know. Still felt pretty. I felt pretty angry, and felt pretty sort of disenchanted with a lot of stuff that was just out there in the world, and it very much started to take on the mentality that like for not on purpose or by design, but I personally was definitely feeling like very much like a loner on the outside of a lot of things and a lot of communities that we were part of. And it's weird, right? Like when you start like when you started when we started like we started playing a lot of stuff like we played festivals and things like that. And aside from like our band members and like a few peers, like I wasn't really like connecting with that many people, and I didn't really feel aside from like the ones I kind of already knew, like we were put in like these like festival environments and stuff, and things that people were like really like uber competitive. Like I started to see that aspect of this music world, and I don't like that, because I don't come from that. I come from the punk rock world where everybody wants to prop everybody else up, and you want to create these communities of like-minded folks doing interesting things. And I very much felt on the outside of a lot of stuff, and I think that the writing that I was putting down at the time lyrically probably reflected that a bit. That I was just feeling, feeling like a outsider, and just kind of like going, all right, well, I'm an outsider. I'm going to be as I'm going to be me on the outside, and I'm going to play as hard as I can, and and try to I don't know, just try to find peace through as much aggression as possible, I guess. And that record has a lot of aggression. That record is probably one of our heavier records in a traditional sense. It's a pretty intense one for sure.
Yeah, that's why I love it. And I was dumb back then. Like a lot, like I mentioned, a lot of bands I loved were really heavy and then going lighter, which I don't know, sometimes I was into it, sometimes I wasn't, but it made me upset at the time because I'm a kid. I'm like
Yeah,
20,
sure.
21 years old. And I sort of assumed you guys Converge did that as well with You Fail Me, but I didn't even hear the record back then, so I made a dumb assumption
Sure.
and just like was out in the wind for a couple years. But then I heard No Heroes and I'm like, oh no, this is absolutely crushingly heavy. I love this.
Now we Converge doesn't know how to do something that's kind of neutered, like
Yeah.
we that's kind of the thing. Like one thing that I know that unifies all of us as people in that band is that we really like biting down on that like raw nerve of something. And when like what Nate said this before, and I completely agree with him. Like when we started this band, one of the things that we would say internally to ourselves, we want to make what we would be fans of. So if there's something that's lacking out there in the like if there's something that we don't like that's out there, we don't want to pull that stylistic or sort of creative or sort of soulful approach or something and just like water down like what we are. Like we want this to be as substantive in almost an uncomfortable way as possible, and that's hard, because it doesn't make us an easy listen. We could make really soft records, but even when we make soft records, we make super dark records that are still uncomfortable. The
Right.
Blood Moon records, like an example of that. Like um, the first song we released on that is a song I wrote that's like 8 minutes long. It's not palatable. Like Chelsea's a monster on that. Like it's just like vicious stuff. So um, with with Converge, we just kind of like, just things are always on, not always on 10 in speed, or but in a sort of emotional intensity, always. And it never won't be. It's just kind of like how we do it. This is by design.
Well, I think it should stay there. That's something I was thinking about actually. There's never been a drop off point with Converge. I think it's always improved, it's always gotten better, it's always changed, but it's always retained the spirit. And I think it's because you guys put so much intensity and put everything you have into it, like you're describing, right?
Well, I would hope so. That's obviously more for people that aren't the creators to judge that or look at that. But like for me,
Right.
there's no sense in doing it if we're not going to do it that way. Like this is it. That's what it is. It's by design. It's meant to be. It's meant to be abrasive and uncomfortable and just as pure as possible. So we just try to go for it. And also that's probably why it sometimes it takes a while between records. because it takes some time to get there. We also are very much our own masters, and we do things on our own clock. We do things when we want to do them. We don't really lessons that we learned when we did the Jane record was like, yeah, okay, like we did this stuff. We're now in the sort of lack of better terminology, like mainstream, like music press is starting to acknowledge what our us and our sort of peers and community are doing. But we don't want to be part of a lot of the bullshit that's out there, like, and we saw that and we experienced it, like that's why like we've done like like weird festival tours and put ourselves in uncomfortable positions on purpose to make sure that like, yes, hey, we did it and we don't like it. And we're going to, keep doing our own thing. It's not that we're like above any of that stuff or anything like that. It's just that like, we just don't want to play that game. It just isn't it just isn't, what we are. And that's always a challenge being a punk rock person. You're always going to like struggle with that because this world is full of places and opportunities to compromise, and we just do our best not to.
We know there is a new Converge record being worked on. Kurt mentioned a little bit about it when he was on the show, and I know Ben has talked about it a little. What can you tell us, Jake, now that we have you here? The people need to know.
People need to know. Well, we have a lot of ideas, and really it's just comes down to logistics, and getting together and getting all of our schedules to kind of fit together. We're all pretty busy folks, even though three of us do live very close to each other. Like, I mean, Nate and I play, we talk all the time via text and stuff, but I haven't seen Nate in like 3 months. Like,
oh wow.
No, and and we live probably 8 minutes from each other, but we just been super busy. He's been meaning to come here and grab Aaron Turner's guitar head and a Voorhees record that have been sitting on my desk for like 3 months. He still hasn't come by. Kurt's 5 miles down the other side of the road over here, and like I've actually probably seen him more. Because when he got sick and was having some issues, I saw him in the hospital. But I haven't seen him, much since then, just because we all get so busy, and we're all in daily communication. But it's just like we're like I say like we're kind of like we're like siblings, if that makes sense. Like, we would literally do everything and anything for each other. And, we all love each other more than we could ever put into words. And we show up and do whatever at any time. But like, we can also go for like, months without seeing each other. And it's absolutely fine. It's not a mean thing. It's just kind of is what it is. It's like a family kind of experience.
Yeah.
So with that said, yeah, logistically, it's challenging to get us all together. Our schedules are all nuts. You kind of know my work schedule because we kind of went over some of that before. And Nate's got a family commitments and work commitments and commitments with Cave In, so he stays quite busy. And Old Man Gloom as well when they're active. And Ben's in California, so anytime we want to all physically be together, it's a bit of challenging to get everyone there. It's plane tickets and coordinating the schedules and stuff. So that's probably what takes the most time out of anything. But yeah, like we're working on stuff. We have a lot of ideas, and I try not to. I don't really go. I saw Ben write something the other day. He's like, "This is like the best material ever," or something like that. And,
right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't look at things in those terms. It's I think we're a good band, and I know we're we're a good band and we're a seasoned band and we know what we want and what we don't want. So I know that it's going to be a beautiful creative thing that we put together once it all kind of comes together. But yeah, it's just getting us all in the same place. As I said before, Kurt had some health issues and we ended up having to cancel some shows recently, and but it did allow us to try to figure out our future schedule though, and try to scratch out some time to all be in a room together again and work on some of this stuff, because it's been a minute. We've had it and we've been demoing since we finished the Blood Moon record. So I don't know. It's a lot of songs that we have, or at least the skeletal the skeletal makings of a bunch of things. And there's still songs and riff ideas that haven't been properly demoed yet. And I'm already looking at a lot, a couple dozen already.
Nice.
So yeah, we're gonna get there. So right now that we're just kind of, just trying to carve out the time, but hopefully in the next couple of months we'll be able to get some time in and make some progress there. I've got some ideas and some, song titles and roughed out things kind of all there alongside of all of this music as well. We also have, our Blood Moon record. It wasn't is not like a one and done sort of situation, where that's very much a version of our band that is continuing and going to continue. Steve keeps asking me to set aside time to work on stuff with him, so I want to try to do that as soon as possible too. Hopefully, by midsummer, I'd at least like to be able to sit down with him and go over some of the ideas that we've already recorded and make some progress on that stuff, so we can bring it to everybody else.
That's good. I was going to ask about that too. Yeah, here's what Ben said about the new Converge, which caught my eye. We have Crowd Killing, Fugazi, Mars Volta, Entombed, Mathcore Madness, Slow Nate riffs, shitty riffs, emo riffs. I was like, all right, great. So these are all things you've done before.
Yeah, the shitty ones are mine, probably. But he has an aversion to some styles of riffs that I really like, and so he usually calls those the shitty riffs.
Yeah,
but no, there's a lot of good stuff in there. It's gonna be great. As far as the timetable and stuff, I'm not sure. I hopefully we can get some work into it in the next few months, and we'll see where that lands us.
Do you guys still all have to get in the room together to really solidify everything?
Yeah, we don't do it any other way.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
It's that's very much that's by design. That's one of Kurt's things that he's been pretty adamant about, and I understand from his perspective of being a engineer and working with bands day in day out. He sees the creative process of other bands every day, and he knows when a band comes in half prepared, to record a record. And just because we all know the material, and you might know your parts and know what you want to do, doing it remote doesn't really capture the spirit sometimes. So sometimes you have to be in the room and get frustrated with each other and sort of like fight and claw for your ideas to kind of come together. And that's important, like with Converge especially, that's a lot of us writing. Like you should see us. We agonize over like a song that'll be like a minute and 3 seconds long, and we will go through every variation and version and idea of a change that we want to do, and turn ourselves upside down doing that. And it takes like days sometimes, and then there'll be some songs that'll just magically all fall into place. but it's all part of the process, and it's just what our process is. So I understand from his perspective. Again, like he sees when bands come in, they can play the song, but they don't feel the song.
Yeah.
And I really understand that. We've only done one song ever in a remote capacity, and that was we did a single for we did it just to do it, and it ended up being on the Cyberpunk video game that came out a couple years back.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And we worked on it in the studio together, but drums were tracked in California, and it came out good. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
But I like somebody like Kurt, who has an engineer's ear and a creator's ear, because he penned that specific song. Like, it doesn't, that recording of it from with all of us, it just doesn't have the exact energy he wanted. So we need to remedy that in the future. We don't want to put ourselves in a place where where nobody, where anyone in the band feels like they're not, they're just not getting 100% out of what the song can be. And even if it's just a matter of like us just yelling at each other for hours and days together in the studio, going through everything, like, that's part of the process. And then you get to that point where the song's finished. We didn't really get that chance with that song, and he didn't like that experience. And I understand.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it's important that you and the band are maintaining that, because we've seen it a million times, like Guns N' Roses back in the day, like everyone records in different studios. No one wants to see each other. And then you get that kind of empty feeling in the music like you're talking about.
Yeah, you need the energy. That was like a thing with this Umbra record, like it was really challenging for us, because we recorded that at least wrote it in a modern way, because our drummer also lives in Virginia, so it's a hike, and so a lot of stuff, everything was demoed, but then you get together and you're sort of refining and tweaking little things when you're in the studio, and sometimes that stuff can go smoothly, and other times it can be a really big challenge to navigate that stuff, and it can be a time suck and an energy suck when you want to put the time into other aspects of something. But with the Umbra record, one thing we wanted to sound like really, really alive. A lot of metal records or heavy records now sound quite sterile and don't sound wild, because everybody is digitally editing everything to death. They don't leave any sort of flubs and nuances and personality in things. It gets removed from a lot of music. And even heavy music starts to sound just artificial.
Yeah.
And we wanted this to be alive. Like one thing with like Converge, like we predominantly don't play to a click track or anything like that. And the same thing is like with Umbra, we're like, no, everything's going to be wild, everything's going to be crazy, and we're going to rush in some places and we're going to slow down in other places, and it's going to have that human ebb and flow and have that energy that us as listeners of music, strive to hear. And so yeah, that was really important for Umbra just as much as it is for Converge.
I'm surprised to hear you don't record to a click. I like that, but I guess everyone's skilled enough where you don't really need to, and you can just lock it in like you need to. Plus, I know what you're talking about. A lot of modern recordings, they have this weird, crisp, digital, genty, like, it's hard to describe the sound, but a lot of modern heavy records have this like haze in it that I don't really like.
Yeah, it just doesn't sound alive.
Yeah.
It does. It might sound angry. It might sound, intense, and it might be musically good. Like, the songs might be good and they might connect with you. But I want it to sound like it's alive. Like, I want it to sound like, especially with heavy music, like I want it to sound like it's on fire. I want that kind of heightened emotion.
Exactly. Well, let's remind everybody of what we have coming up. Umbra Vitae, the new LP, Light of Death, is coming out June 7th, so we want everyone to pick that up, right?
Yes. I'm really happy with the album. It's a, it's a, I feel like if there was, I don't think what I do is, I don't know. I yell really loud. I sound crazy. Um, my voice happens to have like a tone that sounds like Blaine from The Accused or Charles from Rorschach or something. That's like what I'm going for because that's what I was given. And this record sounds like that and sounds wild. And it's, I think it's one of my, at least from a recorded perspective, I think I felt great doing it. Um, and I think you can hear it in the record and you can hear it in the performances. And I think it's a pretty wild ride. So I'm excited for people to check it out. I think we made a pretty great record.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. And I know Converge has some dates coming up. I think overseas. We saw that Kurt was in the hospital and he was dealing with some things, but based on what he said on social media, he seems to be doing better now, which is great.
Yes.
So what Converge shows do we have coming up?
Yeah, so he thankfully got out of the hospital. That was a very stressful time for all of us, and we're glad that he's on the mend and doing better. He's back on his feet. He's not 100%, but he's getting closer. And we canceled some stuff, rescheduled some stuff. Right now, we have our first Converge dates will be in July, end of July into August, just like the first week there. We have some festivals and some things we're doing. Typical festival season over there, so a lot of bands head over for these larger festivals, and we get invites to some of them, and if we can make them happen, we do. Then we also have some other stuff. We're playing New England Hardcore and Metal Fest, which we haven't done in a really long time. That happens in Worcester in September, end of September. We're also playing the Metal Injection Festival the following day on the 22nd of September. That should be interesting. And then we were able to reschedule our Latin America tour that was supposed to happen in April. We moved to November. And that's still happening. And we're also playing the Blissmas 24 show in Buffalo, New York. And that's the X Every Time I Die guys who all started Better Lovers. They're continuing on with that theme of their holiday shows. And they've offered us, to do it many times, and we haven't been able to do it. And this year we can, so we're going to do it. And I think we're going to try to do a few local-ish regional shows around September as well. And that's pretty much it. Umbra has 3 shows with the Hope Conspiracy because our records come out basically within a week of each other. And we're doing we're going to do Boston or Cambridge, and then we're going to do New York and Philly. And then we'll see what the rest of the year is looking like for all of us. But that band also has a lot of full schedules because the Red Chord is active again, doing stuff. John's super busy with Uncle Acid and whatnot, and Sean's always busy with Twitching Tongues and tattooing and doing a million other things. So yeah, we'll make time for stuff though. We're fortunate to be in this position, and we're appreciative of it. So we're just gonna keep on keeping on.
I love it. And it sounds like we can expect more Converge Blood Moon. How about Where Are Your Wounds? What's the status?
I have an album demoed for that as well. And the last week or two, I've been pretty inspired from a riff perspective, and I've written a bunch of things that I think are pretty good that I need to pass along to the guys. So it's all there too. Yeah, so we're just going to keep making stuff, and hopefully people will listen and pay attention to what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've been listening to you since I got into this music way back in 1998, and I've never stopped, and I appreciate everything you're doing, so thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time, and thanks.
And there you have it, Jacob Bannon. Now, this is an episode of this podcast I have always wanted to do. I thought maybe one day I'll have Jacob Bannon on the show. I hope that happens. And look, here we are. It finally happened, and I'm glad it did. And what A great discussion it was. He was really forthcoming. It was interesting to hear about his day-to-day and everything going on at Deathwish Inc. It was really interesting to hear his perspective on changes in the music industry over the years and how he and the label have adapted. One thing I didn't really think about, Jane Doe has become such a thing over the years, and rightfully so. It's a fantastic album, and my starting point 99% of the time when I go back and listen to Converge. But one thing I didn't think about is kind of the burden Jake is carrying with this album, right? He said he has a lot of painful memories associated with that record. First of all, there's the subject matter. I know it has somewhat to do with a breakup that he went through at some point, but then he talked about how they had to part ways with Aaron during that record, and there was lineup changes, and it was just a difficult period for him. So there's this album in their catalog that is so beloved, and imagery that is so burned into everything. You can't go to a show without seeing the Jane Doe face. On the other side of that coin, a lot of painful memories for Jake and maybe the rest of the band too, but that was really interesting. No heroes. I thought that was a super interesting part of the conversation where Jake said he felt like a loner and was left out of a lot of communities that he and the band were part of. And Jake said he felt very much on the outside of a lot of things, which surprises me because Converge were a leading band in this scene when I entered into this scene. And in my mind, they're doing it. They're up there. They're invited to everything. They're playing everything. They're part of it. But he felt on the outside. So that just goes to show you that people are people and we have the same feelings and we deal with the same things. So if we see someone and think, oh, they've got it all going on, they get on every show, they have everything going for them. Maybe not. Maybe not. That was really interesting. And No Heroes is a personal favorite of mine for Converge. It's one I think about a lot too. Actually, I was going through something where I felt really on the outside and not supported and rejected by a community that I thought was there for me. And I remember thinking of that album specifically, No Heroes. I remember taking a picture and posting it on Instagram and calling the picture No Heroes. So it's interesting that I was going through that and felt that same thing and thought of that record specifically. So much interesting stuff in that discussion. And Umbra Vitae. Now, I've spent a lot of time with the band Umbra Vitae this past week, and I really like it. I really like it a lot. Shadow of Life is a very, very strong debut. There's a lot of different styles going on in here. We've got hardcore, we've got breakdowns, we've got blast beats, we've got straight ahead metal riffs. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. And Light of Death. Now, I have heard an advance of the new Umbra Vitae record, Light of Death. And that comes out this Friday, June 7th on Deathwish Inc. And wow, I mean, if you're a fan of this band, you're going to love this record. Imagine Shadow of Life. I mean, there's not any vast stylistic change, which I wouldn't want anyway. Just imagine Shadow of Life, but bigger and better and more focused. It's awesome. And the production is just great. I mean, it was recorded at God City Studios, so we know the quality we are going to get from that studio. The production is spot on. It's big, it's clear, it's heavy, and that's exactly how I like it to sound. My favorite tracks from Light of Death: Belief is Obsolete, Velvet Black, Cause and Effect, and Nature versus Nurture. 2 of those are singles that are out now, so you can hear the singles now as you wait for the album to drop this Friday. But yeah, definitely check it out. And really interesting hearing about Umbra Vitae too. How that band came together and the lyrical approach Jake takes with that band versus how he would approach things in Converge. Umbra Vitae is just a really, really good band. They bring these serious metal vibes, but we get our breakdowns too, which is good because I want them and I need them. This was just a great episode. Couldn't have gone better. My only regret is that there was a lot of things I wanted to talk about that I didn't get a chance to talk about. But with a guest like Jake, you've just got to, he's done so much. He has done so much. You just got to pick the things you want to talk about and run with it. And, the conversation goes in directions that you don't expect. And I just went with it. Oh, and Umbra Vitae is playing Saturday in Brooklyn with the Hope Conspiracy. They're both playing at the Meadows on June 7th. I'm going to that gig, and I'm really excited. So thank you so much, Jacob, for coming on the show. Yeah, Converge played the first big hardcore show I ever went to. Every band ever was on it. Converge, For the Love of, Turmoil, The Dillinger Escape Plan, other bands I can't remember. And that was my first time seeing Converge. I really dug it. After seeing them live for the first time, I picked up When Forever Comes Crashing. That had just come out at the time. And then, I went back and got the other albums before that. And I've been a fan ever since. They've never slowed down. In fact, when I started driving, it was very important to me to get a CD player in my car. I wanted that really badly. And I still remember the first CD I played when I got that CD player put in when I was 16 or 17 years old. Converge, Petitioning the Empty Sky. So, yeah, longtime fan. And again, just really happy to have Jake on the show. So, let's check in. How are we doing? I am doing a lot better than I was last month. I think I told you sometime before, around my clean date anniversary, which is in May, my sober anniversary, I always feel bad for whatever reason, but I got hit really hard this year, but I got through it and I feel better now. I started running in mid-May. I'm doing around 3 to 4 runs a week. I started around a half mile and I've worked my way up to 1 mile, a 1 mile run, which I do around 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, 3 times a week. I'd like to get that up to 4, but I'm taking it slow because I just started and I don't want to injure myself or burn myself out. My day job is in front of computers. The podcast is in front of computers. Most of my hobbies are me seated in front of computers. So it's good for me to get something physical going, some kind of physical activity, physical exercise, and get out there and run. I love it a lot. I have more energy. I feel good. So I will continue doing that. And it's going to help me get in shape for my upcoming gigs too. I'm working on booking some shows for my band, which will be announced soon. So I'm running. I'm feeling better. I'm working on getting my band's release ready. You'll hear more soon. What else is going on? Oh, I saw the band No Lights. They were on tour out here on the East Coast, all the way from San Francisco. And I was talking to their singer Matt on Instagram, and he invited me out to their gig at the Mercury Lounge last week in Manhattan. So I went to that, and I really like the band. I really like them. Check out their 2023 LP, Dream Eraser. Excellent post-punk shoegaze vibes. You'll like it. And I'll add a song to the New Scene 2024 Spotify playlist. So check them out there. Go see them if you can. And check out the record. And shout out to you, Matt. Good to see you at the show. Good to see the band. And good to hang out for a little bit afterwards. Here are some New Scene updates for you. Number 1, I mentioned it in the beginning of the show. We are on the push to 300 Apple Podcast and Spotify reviews. So please, if you have not rated the show, hit that 5-star button on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The reviews help out in the grand world of podcasting and podcast rankings and all of that stuff. So if you liked this episode, if you like the show, open up your Apple Podcast app, search the New Scene, scroll down a bit and hit the 5-star button. You can write a review in Apple Podcasts too. So if you write a review, I'll read it during this section of the show. And Spotify, you just need to search the New Scene. The 5-star button thing is right there at the top. Hit the 5-star button. Thank you, everybody who has reviewed. Also, you remember me complaining about people complaining about the intro of the show on YouTube. Well, I've been going through and tagging every YouTube video I have of New Scene episodes. I'm going to add tags to every YouTube New Scene episode. So that's back to episode 88, right? I've been doing that. It's in progress. I think I'm back to episode 150, and I'm going to tag everything back to episode 88 So you can click around and skip around if you don't want to hear the intro or the end part of the show. I probably won't be tagging all of the Northeast Scene episodes. You know, they're older at this point. I don't know if technical support extends to those episodes anymore, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'll be motivated. And that's about it that's going on here. It's Saturday night as I record this. It's a beautiful day out. I've got the window open. I've got a cool summer breeze coming in. I'm feeling good. I've had a day to pretty much do whatever I want all day. And I went and took a walk earlier, and it's good. It's good. I'm enjoying this weather right now before it gets too hot. And there's good things on the horizon. So I hope everybody out there is doing well. So we are going to end the show with a music recommendation. The band Bats and Mice. They just released a brand new LP. It's called PS Seriously, and it's their first new LP since like 2002, and their first release since 2010. PS Seriously is out now on Love It Records, and I highly recommend it to you. The band features Dave Neesmith. He was in Men's Recovery Project. He was in Sleepy Time Trio, and he's been in Bats and Mice for as long as they've been around. He was also on this podcast last year, episode 184, so make sure you go back and listen to that episode. It's worth your time. So we are going to end the show with a song from PS Seriously. The song is called Never Break Again. I'll add it to the New Scene 2024 Spotify playlist. You can find all of our guests for the year and all of my personal recommendations on the playlist. Find it, like it, and we also have a Spotify playlist for every year the podcast has been around. So you can go back and listen to all the music associated with the show for that year. So check it out and check out Bats and Mice. I'm back next week with a big time return guest who just put out one of the best records of 2024. I'll see you then.